Hi, I'm Len Rydell, Executive Director of the Blue and Gray Education Society, and I'd like to welcome you to another lectures in the Sherman's March to the Sea series, which we conducted at the Georgia Historical Society in February of 1996 in Savannah, Georgia. In the introduction to the series, I told you a little bit about our relationship with Ed Bars and what he had done and how this was such a meaningful event for us. Well, in this program, after we had done the lectures work, we then deadheaded the group on a bus from Savannah up to meet Ed, who had flown in to Atlanta, and then the people in Atlanta who had hosted him drove him down to meet us at some designated location, I believe, in Macon, Georgia, if I've got Macon, Georgia, just south of Atlanta. We picked him up there, and there we commenced doing the tour. We had to leave early, and with this being February, the days were still relatively short, and so we had to hustle. And if I remember correctly, we just barely got to a place like Fort McAllister before the daylight ran out. I remember racing through Camp Millen, the prison camp there, and then getting over and doing a quick thumbnail in the twilight at Fort McAllister before going back. Having done that, Ed was with us that night and was going to be with us until we finished the program. And so the next was, later that night it was. So after we finished, we went back, gave people a little bit of a break, and then we had a banquet dinner. And I had him speak at that. So he was the last speaker at the event. And what I asked him to do was take it beyond Savannah, because we'd already done with Durham and everything. The day before, we'd already finished up with that. And so I asked him to take Sherman in his march through the Carolinas, something he was eminently qualified to do, and certainly provides, I think, the capstone commentary and perspective to help you understand why Sherman marched to the sea and what the practical ramifications of it were. So please relax and enjoy another Ed Bars presentation, Sherman's March through the Carolinas.
The home folks, as Sherman apparently goes anywhere he wants. Railroads are cut, supplies go short, and Lucius Northrop still holds firm in the Confederate Commissary Department, undoubtedly the most incompetent of all staff officers holding staff positions in either the North or the South. Hope we don't have any relatives of Lucius Northrop here. Well, Sherman is now ready to make his moves, to make his next march. He's going to leave a force to hold the enclave. They'll send General Gruber, recovering from his wound, received it. Peter Gregg will soon be arriving here. Sherman was going to keep the same organization, but will have some different personalities than we've been talking about yesterday on our march. When he begins the march, he will again have his two wings, his right wing, and in January, he will shift the right wing of the army from Savannah, high water, to Port Royal, and Hilton Head. That's where they'll start from. General Hardee, who we heard about from Dr. Hughes this morning, having evacuated Savannah, is not feeling well. He is up at Charleston, holding Charleston, which is infested by Union troops of the Department of the South, conducting this operation that has been seemingly to go on interminably since the landings, the second siege having begun with the landings in July 1863 on James and Folly Island, but still Charleston holds firm. So they will ship Howard. Now Howard, for the ones with us yesterday, has a new man on the block. No longer commanding the 15th Corps will be Peter John Osterhaus, as they had across from Atlanta to the sea. Having returned to duty with the Army, he had been up campaigning. Lincoln pulled out all stops. Who better to have campaigning for him up in Illinois but a member that had been a former wheel horse of the Democratic Party in the state of Illinois. A man who had up till the secession of the South had been a dough-faced Democrat. That's a Democrat from the North who always votes with the South, his Southern colleagues, on sectional issues. Even Ben Butler was even a more notorious dough-face than General Logan. Logan, of course, with the secession of the South, being from Southern Illinois, he can say that what is important to he and his constituents, a good politician reflects the will of his constituents, is the Mississippi River. And he will warn his Democratic friends in Congress that the people from the old Northwest will hew their way to the Gulf with a bayonet, with a sword. He will be on the battlefield at Manassas. He doesn't know there's going to be a second Manassas. In civilian clothes as a member of Congress. And he will reputedly take a rifle and take a few shots at the Confederates as a civilian. He's luckier than Congressman Ely, Republican from Buffalo, who ends up, he gets to see Richmond. Hogan, fortunately, does not. Ely sees it as a prisoner, and he doesn't run quite fast enough. Well, Logan enters service, we're all about from Dr. Hughes' book, Colonel of the Dirty First. He's risen rapidly in rank. He is very miffed, of course, and West Point will feel his wrath after the war, and probably, fortunately for West Point, he doesn't live a long time, because on that day, that William T. Sherman, in essence, gives him the back of the hand and gives him the Army of Tennessee to Oliver O. Howard, old Prayer Buck, instead of Black Jack Logan. Black hair, black flashing eyes. You go to the cyclorama, and he paid for it. He didn't have a pack. And you notice who's the most prominent character in there. You have to know the picture of the cyclorama to see Sherman. You have to know that McPherson is in that ambulance wagon dead. But out in that foreground, you can see Black Jack as he comes forward to seal off. Man, he goes right through. So he is back with the Army, and he will lead the 15th Corps. For the ones west with me yesterday, this is the politician's corps with leadership. Frank Blair will lead the other, as he did yesterday, the 17th Corps. As we pointed out yesterday, Frank's father is Old Man Blair, the Clark Clifford of those days, advisor of all presidents from Jackson to Lincoln. In fact, while Sherman is getting ready to leave, although he doesn't know it, Old Man Blair has set up a meeting on the River Queen in Hampton Roads, Virginia, with 3 representatives of the Confederacy, headed by your Georgian, Alexander Stevens, probably the last time he'll ever have anything to do with Jeff Davis, and the President and Mr. Seward, to try and make peace. But it bothers. There are 2 things they can't agree on. Davis will not agree on anything except independence, Mr. Lincoln isn't ready to talk about anything, compromises, except they'll talk after reunion. So it breaks up. Now we'll have Brother Howard over there at Hilton Head. Howard over there at Hilton Head. This is the challenge facing Joseph Eggleston Johnston. Sherman, on the 1st of March, the 15th Corps at Cheraw forces its way across the Petey River against resistance by Hardee's men. The Federals are now beginning to move forward toward the South Carolina border. They're now in the pleasantries of the Cheraw Hills. As Johnston begins to concentrate his armies, Sherman's troops now to be appearing, it looks like they're heading toward Fayetteville. Fayetteville is in North Carolina. It's the seat of an arsenal before the war, which has become an armory. Also, arsenal, store weapons, armory you manufacture. They had taken many of the equipments salvaged from the Harper's Ferry armory, and much of the machine tools had been sent to Fayetteville. So Fayetteville is what the two wings converge on. Moving on the right, the Army of the Tennessee; on the left, the Army of Georgia. Screening the army staying between the Confederates, who are to the north of them, is the Union cavalry, commanded by Judson Kilpatrick. On the 9th, the next major engagement will be on the morning of the 10th, early morning hours of the 10th. On the night of the 9th, Judson Kilpatrick goes into camp with his headquarters at the Monroe House at Monroe's Crossroads in North Carolina. A short day's march with cavalry from Fayetteville. He's relaxed to the upstairs room with his mistress. He will be surprised as Wheeler's cavalry attack from the west. Butler's cavalry, the Gettysburgers, everybody knows Gettysburg generals. Evander Laws had bad times. No longer does he lead that proud Alabama brigade that he had led on the morning in that attack at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the 2nd of July. He is now reduced to leading cavalry. They will surprise Kilpatrick. Kilpatrick will abandon his mistress. Now, I don't know if he's in his underwear or if he's wearing a nightshirt. If you've ridden a horse, you better hope he's wearing his underwear. As he escapes, his men are routed, but he will rally them. They'll counterattack and drive back the Union cavalry. Hampton and Kilpatrick, as I need not remark, are not admirers of each other, even before this. Wheeler and Kilpatrick knew each other in the old army. And undoubtedly, Wheeler, as a 4th classman, when Wheeler went to West Point, you had 5 years to get out. So he'd be a 4th classman when Wheeler was a 5th classman, or plebe. undoubtedly he knew him well. Probably not favorably from his days at West Point, if you know what hazing is. So they were kind of friendly, bitter rivals, but Hancock detests them. On the morning of the, meanwhile, Union troops on the 10th, the vanguard moves in. On the Neuse River. Sherman notified it will make a 26-mile ride. Arrive in Fayetteville. The commander of the arsenal, old friend of his from the army. Later, he meets with Sherman. Sherman will make some remarks to him about turning his back on the Union, but he does detail men to guard his house. Guard building they don't burn in the army. So the Federals have reached Fayetteville. The most welcome thing for the troops when they're in Fayetteville, coming up the Neuse River, are steamboats. Again, showing why they like Sherman and his men, underscoring. Men like officers they can see. The ones that they know aren't back in a bomb-proof. The men who think of their welfare. First thing to be landed is mail. And mail is something that is all important to the soldier. So as they remain in Fayetteville, Bragg now has evacuated Goldsboro and is moving towards Smithfield. Johnston is gathering his army, but he needs time. And he assigns the buying of time to Nat Hughes' hero, or the one we heard about this morning. It'll be William J. Hardee. Because if Johnston is going to win a battle, the Union Army is going to have to be separated. Now, as we know, except on a very few isolated instances, whether it's from Atlanta to the sea, or from Midway to Fayetteville, there are very few times, not over 2 days, in which the armies, and that is between here and Atlanta, where the armies move within a day, 2 miles of each other. So the task is to divide the 2 wings. Attack one wing when one wing is at least a day's march. On the 15th, the Union Army moves out of Fayetteville, moving north on a road paralleling and a short distance to the west of the Neuse River, east of the Neuse River, will be the left wing of the army, with which Judson Kilpatrick will be traveling. Most of the wagons, since there's going to be trouble, it is going to be with the left wing. We'll be moving on a parallel road that goes direct toward Goldsboro. That will be the right wing. Late on the afternoon of the 15th, about 10 miles north of Fayetteville, off to your east is Black Creek. To the west is the Neuse River. So you have a relatively narrow front in which it will be difficult for the Union to deploy their large numbers. Skirmishing breaks out late on the 15th. In the skirmishing, Colonel Rhett is captured. Rhett is a South Carolina dandy with boots also up to his crotch as they bring him in. On the morning of the 16th, Hardee deploys his men. Tolliver's division, William Tolliver, everybody knows him, and McLaws. They don't know, they know them, everybody knows them because they come out of the Army of Northern Virginia. For some absurd reason, people that are not Western oriented usually don't know of these people. So they will be deployed, and Hardee will accomplish his mission. 3 times during the day, over a 3-mile front, wonderful place to visit. The road follows the same alignment. A number of the buildings are still standing. Back the North Carolina Highway Department, when they got some complaints about 3 years ago when the Civil War Commission visited them, even painted the markers for the first time in probably 10 years. But Hardee has discharged his mission. He has slowed down the Union advance and allowed the right wing to make good progress. They're moving through the right wing both on the 16th, the 17th, and the 18th will be marching through, you're in the naval industry area. You can see great pine forests. They're in flames. On the evening of the 18th, as it has throughout all day on the 18th, Hampton has been delaying Kilpatrick's cavalry. As they move up the road, they will pass through a small community known as Bentonville. They have given Johnston his opportunity. On the night of the 18th, Sherman, realizing the Army of the Tennessee will soon link up with Schofield at Goldsboro, transfers his headquarters to the Army of the Tennessee, and will travel with them on the 19th. On the morning of the 18th, on the morning of the 19th, passing up through open fields, beyond the Harbor House, the Confederate resistance stiffens. Confederate forces moving up, and the Battle of Bentonville begins. Having the lead, as the cavalry moves aside, is the ideal corps commander. If you could pick the corps commander you want to initiate the attack, is Jefferson C. Davis. Trigger-tempered, aggressive, and he does not get along with the commander of his lead division, General Carlin. They've known each other for a long time. Carlin has served under Davis as far back as the Battle of Stones River. The battle will be joined. Carlin is aggressive. Davis is aggressive. The Confederates will advance. The Confederates have set up a position like a sight. Bragg will be the handle. Army of Tennessee, Hardee's men will be the sight. The sight will be swung down if all works right, and at least the 14th Corps will be chopped to pieces. The Confederates at first gain important successes. The Union heroes will be in Vandiver's brigade. No attack to the front. They leap over, fire, rifle pits still there, in one direction, then turn in the other. Sherman again. By nightfall, the situation is stable. The message goes out, and again, Sherman. Why the soldiers like him. The message arrives of the fierce engagement. The check. Sherman is in his long-handled underwear, smoking a pipe, smoking a cigar. Oh, he went through several of them. Like Grant went through 22. No wonder he died of cancer. And he went through 22 on the first day at the Wilderness. And the message arrives of the fight as he walks back and forth in his underwear. He is not a person that he likes the people to see him. That gives him a character and will make him, and soldiers like characters, as well as soldiers like men who take care of them. So he will issue orders, Howard, to move his troops to the support of General Slocum. The 20th is a day of waste. As Howard's men take position, Johnston remains in position too long. On the 21st, one of the crack Union Division commanders, Joe Mauer, will attack. The Hughes mentioned, in his attack, in a counterattack, Willie will be mortally wounded. Sherman, as Marlick has pointed out, is a man who does not believe in killing great numbers of men. Several occasions, he has had an opportunity to possibly destroy an army, but with frightful casualties. And they'll recall Mauer. Johnston will withdraw. Sherman will move on to Goldsboro. He reaches Goldsboro on the 24th. He's called to City Point for an important meeting to decide what is going down. At City Point, when he arrives, President Lincoln, U.S. Grant, ordered to have meetings. There's serious concern by both the President and General Grant on who will who will destroy the Army of Northern Virginia. What if the men who have come from Cairo, Illinois, all the way to Vicksburg, Chattanooga, Atlanta, Savannah, Columbia, if they're the ones to whom the Army of Northern Virginia surrenders, what problems that could cause in the post-war years. So the decision is made. Sherman will return to Goldsboro. He will make his preparations, but he will not begin his advance from Goldsboro till around the 10th of April. That will give a target of opportunity to Grant. On the 25th, I should say, the day after Sherman arrives at Goldsboro, Lee had made his final attempt to gain some time, bulged, to get out of Petersburg. He had attacked at Fort Stedman. Stedman for the Confederates was a worse disaster than the crater for the Yankees, because the Yankees could afford 4,000 men. The Confederates cannot afford 4,000 men. And on the 29th, Sheridan having arrived on the 26th, Grant begins his movements. 5 forts on the 1st. Petersburg and Richmond evacuated on the night of the 2nd and 3rd. Appomattox on the 9th, on Palm Sunday. The next day, Sherman's men move out of Goldsboro on the 10th. To Smithfield, and into Raleigh on the 14th. Meetings with Johnston on the 16th and 17th. An agreement with Johnston. When Grant returns to Raleigh from his meetings On the 16th, he knows that Abraham Lincoln has been struck down dead. So he leaves orders for the men to stay in camp. He's afraid of riots, afraid of what his men will do if they hear Lincoln is dead. But the next day he will give Johnson very liberal terms. Far more liberal than U.S. Grant gave Bobby Lee. Far, far more liberal than Washington is prepared to accept. When they reach Washington, Marslick has pointed out, Stanton, good administrator, probably as loving man as we've ever had in a position in government, very efficient. Wonderful man, except if you have to deal with him. He goes into orbit. Dr. Marslick points out, all but accuses Sherman of being a traitor. Grant will accomplish, in fact, and on the 26th, again at the Bennett House, they meet, and Johnson will surrender the troops in his department. South Side, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida, and East Tennessee, on the same terms, only written out this time, they can take their horses home with them, as Bobby Lee had given at Appomattox Courthouse. So, we can see, again emphasizing what we heard this morning and earlier this afternoon, what they marched to hear, and goes on to Bentonville, Raleigh, and the Bennett Place, and on to that great day on May 25th. On the 23rd, the Army of the Potomac's Day. Up Pennsylvania Avenue, into 15th Street, the column, the regiments passing in climb, bands playing, uniforms immaculate, led by General Meade. The cheers. The next day, greater cheers. Coming down from the Capitol, right in front of the Capitol where Grant's monument is, down Pennsylvania Avenue. The men of the Army of Georgia and the men of the Army of Tennessee. Floppy hats, floppy uniforms, guns polished. Mother Bickerdike riding her mule. Men following the bummers. Probably men practicing, pretending they're bummers. Following around leading pigs and livestock. The cheers thunders. Sherman riding by, giving the salute, going into the stands, and disdaining to take the proffered hand of the Secretary of War. What a parade it must have been. I saw the inaugural parade in 1953. The last one in which they had 17,000 soldiers. It took 5 hours to pass. Of course, you had lots of things besides soldiers. But you just imagine a parade in which they put almost 200,000 men by in 2 days. What a parade that must have been. Thank you.
Questions, please?
When did Sherman actually put his forces into motion out of Savannah?
They move out, Slocum starts crossing the river on the 29th at Sister Sparrow.
Of what month?
29th of January.
January, okay.
Howard moves out the next day out of Pocatello. he'd moved, Howard had initially moved out of Front Royal and Beaufort and Hilton Head and put him up in Pocatello. Did I pronounce it right?
That's correct.
I always have to worry about these names. But the locals sitting here is glaring at me.
Wasn't Fort Fisher protected by soldiers when Terry took it?
All right, Fort Fisher sits on that peninsula. Now, the garrison of Fort Fisher under Colonel Lamb is about 800 men. He gets some reinforcements when the attack starts. General Bragg, everyone likes to pick on General Bragg. He has Polk's division 2 miles north of Fort Fisher. Now, what Lamb thought he was going to do is when Terry moves south, the army is on the right, the sailors and Marines are on the left. The sailors and Marines charge first because Porter wants to be in there first. There's a lot of guys killed. So nobody, the Confederates initially repulsed them. Now, what Lamb is expecting is Bragg to send Hoke's men to attack the Union rear, which is becoming weaker as they have to pull more men out of the lines facing Hoke to attack Fort Fisher. So everybody likes, so you can whip General Bragg again because he holds Hoke and doesn't send him for to attack. Now, whether Hoke would have broke through the Union troops, they still have a lot of troops there, no one knows. And you've also got to mean, when Hoke moves down that narrow peninsula, those warships lying off the seafront are going to be firing at them. So,
But it was abandoned then?
no, it's stormed. Fort Fisher is stormed.
That's absolutely what I thought. I thought earlier today we were talking.
Oh yeah, the Union retired. Now this is the time Butler and Porter hate each other. So this time Butler thinks, he's read this article. There is, again, this is in Herman's neck of the woods, what he's talking about. He reads about this explosion in England that leveled a war on a ship. So he gets an abandoned ship, Louisiana, and packs it with as much powder as he can. And the Navy now takes over. Porter first thinks Butler and Porter hate each other from back at New Orleans. So Porter says, that's the thing, yes, it's a good idea. Says the Navy will take charge of it because it's got to be towed into position. So they tow the ship into position, anchor it off Fort Fisher, set the slow match, the fuse. They abandon the ship. Now they're all waiting for the explosion of the ship. Is the concussion, either the concussion and the force of the explosion is going to level the fort and paralyze or kill all the defenders. It's going to be the Civil War equivalent of Hiroshima. Everybody waits. Louisiana blows up. It's a tremendous disaster. Now each of them pointed to the other. You dumb cough. So then they get to fighting over that. Butler has put some of his troops ashore. A nor'easter comes in. Butler says, I don't want my troops being assigned shore in a nor'easter. So he pulls his troops out, and they go back. And Porter goes to Grant, who he's a good friend of, and he says, Butler has to go. Now, Grant has held with Butler a long time. Now, if you like to believe, everybody writes their memoirs, you know. So if you believe Baldy Smith's memoirs, the reason Grant will move against Porter is that Butler knows that Grant can't hold his outpost. And according to Baldy Smith, Grant invites Butler to his headquarters without bringing Rollins along, who is Grant's watchdog. And again, I'm quoting Baldy Smith. It may be all BS. But he says that Grant, this is in July 64, when Grant's star in 64 is probably at its lowest. Just after the crater, it's August. And they get Grant beastly drunk in front of all of Butler and all these witnesses. So Smith's argument is going to be that Butler is blackmailing Grant. Take that for water. Or maybe Grant is being Grant may be beginning to smell the presence. Maybe Mrs. Grant is already smelling that she'd like to be in 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, and Butler's a good politician, so, but this is the end of Butler as a general.
Yeah, but it was heavily defended anyway.
It was heavily defended, but they're looking for, as has been pointed out, this is their secret agenda is using a secret weapon to accomplish a mission with no loss. And it's the biggest done in the war.
Other questions? Roger.
As you mentioned, Grant initially ordered Sherman to bring his army by sea to
Yeah.
Virginia. Considering the animosity that existed between Sherman's men and the Army of the Potomac, how well do you think they would have been integrated into those forces?
I think that wasn't the, I don't think Sherman doesn't go that into writing, but that definitely plays a part in the decision in the City Point meeting on 27th and 28th of March, when they decide that Sherman will go back to Goldsboro and he will not move until the second week of April. Hopefully by the second week of April, Grant, who's already scheduled his offensive to begin on the 29th, will have consummated his offensive and have secured the surrender of Bobby Lee. Of course, Sherman doesn't know that the surrender is taking place on the 9th when he moves out on the 10th. That's purely fortuitous, but he knew he knew that Petersburg and Richmond had been abandoned, but he didn't know what day the surrender was going to be. Yes?
One more question? Again, if I can. The parade, it ended with Negroes following the bombers, didn't it? With the three Negroes with their things.
Yeah, well, they had blacks following on, not blacks. So they're not going to be any black soldiers following with the army. They with his. There'll be blacks like that would have been following him out of Egypt.
Oh, they were pioneers, weren't they?
Yeah, they had pioneers. Then they had some women, the mammies.
Yeah, right. Okay. Thank you.